All right. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to wherever you are in the world. Again, we had another nice day like last month, so thanks for coming out and spending your evening with us. Going to go through and do our usual welcome messages. So the agenda for tonight, to thank our sponsors, of course, as we always do, talk about what's new. I'll introduce our guest speaker, Billy Korando. We'll have the main presentation, and then we'll do our usual thing at the end where we talk about some upcoming events, especially one that's tomorrow. And our silver sponsor is Azul, so we thank them for their support. And they're the first ones to offer a downstream distribution of OpenJDK with crack. And I'm going to make that same joke, but it's, yeah. All right. And then our partner is DevNexus. Of course, some of us in this room were there last month. That was a fun event. And our per-meeting sponsors are JetBrains and Jakarta EE, or the Eclipse Foundation. JetBrains, of course, offers the one-year license to IntelliJ IDEA. And then Jakarta EE offers the Crowdcast hosting as well. All right, so what's new? So far, we have 7 JDK enhancement proposals, or JEPs, that are targeted for JDK 23, which is going to be in September. So you can see them listed right there. The interesting one I want to point out is the Vector API. There were 7 incubations, which I thought was kind of high, but I understand why now. And then when they came up with the draft for this one, before it got its own JEP number, it was just an incubator. I'm like, wait a minute, we did this 7 times. And I may have brought it up to Shar at DevNexus last month. But so then all of a sudden, when they made it a candidate, or now it said 8th incubator, because I'm sure it caused a lot of confusion. Yeah. So, and the only reason why is because they're waiting for Project Valhalla to come along a little more before they make this a final feature. So, Stream Gatherers is kind of cool. The second preview, I did some work with this. This is kind of fun. So there's more to come, I'm sure. The ramp down phase 1 is on June 6th. That's when all the JEPs will be frozen, and there won't be any changes, really. Milestone 2 of Jakarta EE11 has been out for a couple of weeks. Milestone 3 should be out very soon. These are the 6 specs that are actually ready. And there are 10 more that are going to be updated that are in various stages of review. But you can see those right there. All right, and then there's the Jakarta EE survey. Please take a moment to fill that out. It ends at the end of this month. And I'm sure InfoQ is going to have, some kind of news piece on that once it's done. All right, so we're very happy to have Billy Korando with us. He's been with us before, but online.
Online, yes.
So we're very happy to have him out here in suburbia.
Yes.
So, he was at Philly last night and New York tomorrow. So we give him the sort of the suburban New Jersey, feel. So Billy is a Java developer advocate with the Java platform group at Oracle. With over a decade of experience in Java, Billy brings a passion for helping developers find ways to reduce tedious work, such as project initiation, deployment, testing, and validation. Through automation and adopting the latest features of the tools in the Java. I thought there was a period there. So, outside of work, Billy enjoys traveling, playing kickball, and cheering on the Kansas City Chiefs. And Billy's also one of the co-organizers of the Kansas City Java group. On a personal level, Billy is like a relatively new cat owner. Yeah. He's got 2 calicos, Vicky and Lulu. And as many of you know, we have 4 at home. And we've had cats for quite some time. So it's always fun sharing stories and absolutely. Pictures and all that. So anyway, thanks for coming out, and we look forward to your talk.
Absolutely.
So, all right.
Thank you for that introduction, Michael, and thank you for having me come out here to New Jersey. I'm glad to actually be out here in person.
There we go. I don't hear anything. Perfect. Thank you for inviting me out here. I'm very happy to actually be out here in person instead of virtual. I'm kind of glad we're kind of past that virtual only time. Being in person adds a whole lot. So you also mentioned in my intro that I'm a fan of Kansas City Chiefs. Yesterday when I was in Philadelphia, they were not as happy with me about that. And you guys are a bit, I guess, more neutral here on that. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. I'll be taking off with JDK Flight Recorder or JFR, just real quick, how many people have heard of JFR before this meetup? So, okay, good. Most. And how many people have like actively used it in production? One. Okay, so that's pretty. It's. I always seem to kind of choose some of these topics that are just way under-recorded or way under talked about, and it's pretty similar where there's always like at least one person, no matter the size of the room, that's actually using production, and then about 3 or 4 people, who have heard of it, because that was pretty similar in Philadelphia yesterday, where we had about 20 people, and there's 100 people, by still one person has used it, about 3 or 4 people have heard of it. All right. So yeah, Chandra asked us earlier, but one of the really important things is to ask questions at any point. I've given this presentation plenty of times, so feel free to ask a question at any point. You won't throw me off too much or anything like that, and I'm here to help you learn about JFR. I guess, Barry, if people ask questions through the Zoom, you'll let me know, or are you monitoring that? Or
And I don't know why.
oh, okay.
Does anybody, do you have any?
Should be all about.
Oh, there we go. Is it gone now? It should be gone. For some reason, my microphone was turned on. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, should hopefully be.
I'm gonna ask the, well, we'll find out in 20 seconds.
Okay. All right. I think if that should, yeah, I think that should be fixed. I don't know why that became unmuted there. So anyways, yeah, I guess you'll be able to let me know if there's any questions that are being asked online. Thank you. And then also you can follow along in this presentation. Perfect. Awesome. Sorry about that. You can follow along in this presentation right here. It should be fully up to date. So yeah. And then if you'd like to know more, we have a lot of great sites. We have dev.java. So there's actually some good information there on JFR, and of course, a lot of other Java topics. We actually recently started taking in some community contributions as well from a few people you might have heard of, like Venkat Subramaniam. He knows a thing or two about Java. So definitely check that out. We also have insight.java. And so we post a lot of articles there that are written by the actual engineers that are working on and committing to the JDK. So obviously, it's great to hear from the actual people working on these projects, do you know more about these projects than the people actually, writing the code? And if they're wrong, they just go ahead and, push the code to JDK to change it so then they're correct. At least that's how I would do it. And then also check out our YouTube. So I also have some videos on JFR. Actually, we'll have some stuff also publishing on related JFR topics here pretty soon as well. So check that out. And we also have our Insight Java podcast. So agenda. We're going to cover at a high level what is JDK Flight Recorder. And then kind of from there, we're going to actually get into a hands-on live coding demo. So definitely feel free also to ask questions, and I can try out different things as well as we're going through it, where we can go through configuring and using JDK Flight Recorder, analyzing results, and then also creating custom events and working with JFR event streams. So what is JDK Flight Recorder? And I'll probably use JFR for the most part here out because that's a lot quicker to say. The history of JFR, it goes all the way back to JDK 7 when then Sun bought out BA Systems and then merged JRocket into our JRocket and Hotspot were merged together into a single JVM. Because JRocket initially developed JFR, which was initially then called JRocket Flight Recorder. So that was all added to the hotspot, which is, I'm guessing, the vast majority of people are using here and online. Back in JDK 7, the really important thing then is that in JDK 11, so how many people are on JDK 11 or later? Most, yeah, that's good to see. But yeah, if you're on JDK 11 or later, it was open sourced and renamed to JDK Flight Recorder. But the important part there is with open sourcing it, you no longer need to have a commercial license to use it in production. So before, if you're familiar with it from JDK 7 or JDK 8, you would have to enable commercial features and then enable start our flight recorder before you can configure it. you no longer need to pass in those two command line flags. In fact, they're no longer even available. And the last thing is it's built, as I kind of already covered, though, it's built directly into the Java runtime. There's not anything you have to go out and do to configure to get using it. It's not some sort of separate binary. It's built directly in, if you're using a hotspot version, directly into it, so you would already have it. To get a little bit more deeper, so JFR is what's called like an event-based diagnostic and profiling framework. So when we'll see the data later, that is all coming from events. So it's just something happens with the JFR or within the JDK or JVM, and that's recorded as an event. And we'll actually look at what those discrete events look like. The other really important thing is that it has an extremely low overhead. So when using default settings, it should be sub 1%. And then even when working with it with profile settings, and we'll cover the differences there, it should still be under 2%. So the whole goal of it is that JFR is used actually by the JDK engineers to actually work on and test the changes and make sure it's like, okay, like a GC engineer is like, okay, let's make some sort of change to the algorithm to improve pause time, maybe lowering it or making it less frequent. They would use a tool like JFR often to, check to validate the results and make sure that their change is giving the expected behavior. But yeah, it's meant to be used continuously in production. So I think a big goal to big item to take away from this presentation is seriously consider start using it in your production applications, because it can be a great way whenever your application runs into some sort of issue, like it runs out of memory or just has like some reason acting very slowly. Being able to go back to the JFR recordings and be like, wait, what happened here, is a great way because it has a lot of detail within there. And that's great to be able to go back and be able to figure out what's going on. And of course, it also covers events both happening within your Java application and then within the underlying JVM as well. So it's a very good broad view into what's happening within your application. But of course, if you can also use customized settings. And so depending on how you write your settings, obviously that could increase the overhead. The biggest thing is just increasing the amount of stack that is captured with an event. That's going to have the biggest impact on your overall or the performance impact. Under the hood, as I mentioned, events are both produced by the runtime and application. And then they are stored in thread local buffers, and I'll kind of show you a little bit of what that actually looks like. But then eventually they're then passed or dumped into a JFR or Java flight recording file where that information can then be viewed. Actually, I need to update this page. So I think when I first put this together, this was back in JDK 18. And at the time, there's over 150 different events. And I think it's probably getting close to like 170 to maybe even closer to 200 events now. So it's covering a whole lot of different behavior and things. One change that was recently added in JDK 22 is like they'll have like an event to say if you're using a JDK method that's marked for removal. So like that could be a way to make sure for keeping things up to date and making sure that you're not and most likely it'll probably be an underlying library using that. But it could be a good way to make sure when upgrading between versions where you might have some risk involved. But it's not just necessarily about like performance, but there's going to be some other broader things that we can cover within JFR. Okay, let's actually get into a demo of using JFR. And actually, I need to get a few things open. So very, very basic level. You can simply get, yeah, I can. Man, that's also now properly working now. And I'll also increase the font. Oh, okay, that's not zooming in so well for the live stream. Yep. There you go. Is that better? Can everyone read it then? So at a very basic level to get using JFR, all you would need to supply is start flight recording. You wouldn't necessarily want to do this in a production setting, which I'll cover a little bit more later. But if you're doing it just for development purposes, that's not too much of an issue. But once you start it, they'll show you here how you can actually extract data out of it. So by using JCMD, the PID, the process ID, JFR.dump, you can then extract data out of that flight recording. So if I was to simply copy this, whoops, wrong way. And then name this GS-jug. That will have dumped out of from that recording or from the that application that's running information about it. And so there's a lot of tools you can use for then to actually analyze that recording. So there is the JFR command line tool, and it has several different options of like you can print, get a summary, views. So to start off with like a summary. So with the summary, this gives you an overall view of like all of the different events that have been executed and run within your application. You can see, even though all I did was just simply start a Spring Boot or a Spring Boot application, you can see that thousands of events have been executed. So like this can give you an overall view of what's happening, and to actually kind of look at some of these individual events. There is the print, and for here, you can take a argument of events. In this case, I'm looking just for thread start events, and that is not the correct recording. And so you can see what these events actually look like. In this case, it's printed out to JSON. It will show you like the start time of when that event happened. It will show you like the stack trace of where that event occurred. So it can kind of give you a good picture of what that event happened with. So like a tool like this, like the summary or the print, it's really great because you can run it on remote. You don't actually have to bring down the recording, which can be quite large. So in this case, it's a bit over a meg, I believe. But if you're actually running in a production setting where you might be looking at something over a space of like 30 minutes or more, that can actually be quite large. But this can be great, particularly if you have like a custom event and like you're maybe saying like, okay, I want to kind of review calls I made to a database or some external service that I'm recording with the event. You can quickly drill down to exactly what you're looking for, because a lot of times maybe with a recording with an application you're fairly familiar with, you're not going to necessarily be looking at the overall picture of it. You're going to be maybe more perhaps debugging a specific issue, and that's what's really great with the JFR print commands. Recently added, I believe it was in JDK 21 is when these were added. They added these new view commands. So as we saw, like this is really great for if you have a very good idea, but it doesn't really give you a good holistic view of what's going on in your application. The new view commands can really help when it comes to that. So using JFR view, they provided many different views that can be used for checking different behaviors. So like JVM information. So let's do JVR Java view, JVM information, GS-jug recording. So like it will give me like, okay, the process ID, when the VM was started, what VM I'm using, some, basic information about that, VM arguments as well. Others could be like, thread count as well. It will show like how many threads are active and running at different stages within the application. Again, this isn't super interesting just because all I did was started up a Spring Boot application. But maybe if you're having an issue where you are having like a thread leak, you can kind of start to see like, oh, okay, it was at this time is when this thread leak started to occur. So these views are really great for kind of getting a little bit more of a holistic view while still being able to handle it from the command line. I know one thing, so like as I showed earlier, there's maybe a 40 or so different views here that they provided. I think hopefully maybe in JDK 23 or maybe 24, they're working on like a query language where you can like write out your own custom view to view different things. I just don't know. I know they're working on it. I don't know exactly when they're planning on getting that implemented, but that's very nice. So again, from the command line, this is great. So that way you can like SSH into your production setting and be able to check it out. Now, if you are kind of wanting to get like an overall view of an application, you're trying to tune it, maybe it's a newer application you're working on, you did like a lot of refactoring for it. One tool you would really, not the right version, one tool you would want to use is JDK Mission Control. Oh, actually, before I go to JDK Mission Control, but it's also relevant to it. So here if I was to write that correctly. So in this case, I am using the Java, I'm using JDK 22 from this command line, or from this terminal. Unfortunately, that's not zooming in, but I'm using JDK 22 here. But I'm actually using JDK 17 in this application here. So one of the really nice features of JFAR is it has really great backward compatibility. If I was running this Spring Boot application on JDK 7, I would still be able to read the recordings from it. So let's say like, oh, this view tool is really cool, but we're not going to be on JDK 21 or 22 here anytime soon. You could actually still have it running on your local machine to be able to like go in and inspect a recording file. You wouldn't necessarily have to be running JDK 22 to take advantage of some of these analyst tool features.
So does this mean that the command line works independent of the content and the backward compatible?
Yes. Yeah, the JFR tool, yeah, can read all the way back to JDK 7 U40. And let's see, this is the 8 one. Let me get rid of this. And then, and somewhat similar or in that same vein. So yeah, here I'm using JDK Mission Control 9. And so JDK Mission Control 9, it was just released here. Well, earlier this month is when the binaries were made available, and it was code released back in March. And it requires JDK 17 to run. But again, with what we just talked about, is like I could be reading from a JDK 7 recording on this just fine. You just need JDK 17 to run it, but it's still backwards compatible to older versions of Java. Now, if I was to open that recording, we had a little bit earlier. So this first view here, this is called the automated analysis results, as you can hopefully read here as well. And the purpose of this is like there's like a rules engine that's built into JDK Mission Control. It can kind of give you maybe a high-level overview of potential areas you might want to consider. Like here, there's 25 threads executing in parallel. It seems within, pretty sure it must be happening within Spring Boot itself that some 95 errors were thrown. So, that might be worth checking out. But that's it. This can be kind of a very high-level idea of like, again, a new application you're profiling, maybe some areas you should consider checking out. That said, on the left side, the outline of the page, it breaks the analysis results into 3 different layers. So at the top layer, we have the Java application. Okay, at least it's cutting off a bit on my screen, but as long as people can see it online. We have the Java application then we have the JVM internals, and then finally the environment. And so like this can be obviously great that you're like, okay, wait, why is this application running really weird or something? Like it's not performing nearly as well as I thought it should be. And it's great you can go in here and see like, oh, what actual properties and command lines were actually being used to run it. So GC configuration, you can see like, oh, okay, the heap size, like we were supposed to set it to 4 gigabytes, but we actually ran it at 512, and that's why. Or I guess I have it at 8. But if I set it, we misconfigured it to something that can obviously help with the analysis of like what went wrong. Within here, you can see like all the different threads executing. One thing that's a bit unfortunate, I know it used to actually work better in an old version of JMC. It would be really good about showing if there's a block thread. Now, in this case, I don't think there's actually any block threads right now in my application, but when putting together some content on JDK Mission Control, I did put together an application that would deliberately block some threads, and it wasn't showing properly here. So there is ways of doing that with JMX, but at least unfortunately, hopefully that'll get fixed here in a future version to better show if you have a block thread. But yeah, he'll also show where exceptions are occurring. A very useful tool is the method profiling page. So this can really help you with figuring out where you should be spending your time if you're running into perhaps a performance issue on your application. Figuring out how to better make use of string utils read string. Okay, that's taking up about 9% of CPU, closer to 10%. So obviously improving that, would have a greater impact on improving system application performance than say spending time on improving calls to ASCII bytes of hash code. All this is obviously in this case happening in the underlying framework layer. But still, this can tell you if like you're running into issues with performance with your application. This can kind of tell you like in throughput or CPU usage, help you to figure out where you should be spending your time working on improving performance, because you could have a case like, oh, we're calling this method all the time. And so from the code perspective, it looks like this method might be taking up a lot, but then you go into here and you might find out it's only like taking up 1% while there's some other method being called that, taking up 30%. It's like, okay, that's where you should be spending your time for improving performance, not there. Yeah, a lot of great tools. And again, similarly here, where you can spend time figuring out, again, what might be taking up memory here. In this case, a byte array, that's the underlying structure for strings. All right. Oh. Notes. Oh yeah, one other thing that's really nice is, so again, imagine you're running an application in production and for some reason you didn't have Flight Recorder running, like maybe generally your applications are all running super well. And so you just maybe don't want to have even that extra 1% of overhead running over it with JFR, but then maybe your application starts running into some sort of performance issue, and rather than just kill it and restart it and not have any information about it, you wanted to maybe capture some information before you kill it, you can actually start JFR on an application that's already running. You don't have to start JFR at startup. So for this application, ACMD, so yeah, it's running on 708007. So if I go to my handy dandy little cheat sheet here, so now JFR is running on this application. And then if I was to do, that's not what I wanted to do. I can perform a dump and then get data out from it. Obviously, again, there's not a whole lot that was within here because it's just an application that's just kind of running there. But that's a great way of applications running in production. You forgot to have JFR on it, starts running into issues. you can capture some information about it before you kill it to maybe actually be able to figure out what was going on. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can you repeat the question?
Uh-huh.
Can I run this on a remote machine and connect to production also, or do I have to be on the
Yeah, you should be able to connect, like you could like SSH through it, or you can also start it up through the like JMX API to start running it as well. I haven't done that too much from the command line, but oh, sorry. The question is can you start JFR on a remote machine, or do you have to be connecting to it locally? So that was a question, and the answer is yes. I do know within JMC, like it has a tool where you can set it up to connect to a remote machine to start. I can start up a JFR connection. What was the
tool you were showing on the screen?
This tool right here? JDK Mission Control, or JMC for short. Yeah, so it is. Yeah, it is based on Eclipse. So like really early on, they did like their own implementation, but like version 2 of JMC, they switched to using Eclipse as the underlying framework for the visualization of it. Yeah, absolutely. No.
Just a quick question. Is JMC still included with Java?
No.
As
So
of
I
21.
should have also mentioned that back in JDK 11,
Right.
when JFR was open source, part of that was also the open source JDK Mission Control, and it's now a separate binary, so it's no longer included within the JDK.
Okay.
But it's still free to use, and still kept up to date as well.
Right.
Huh?
Also, quick question.
No,
Will
no,
I
you
be
please,
able
yeah,
to
go.
find any like virtual threads related information in this new version, in version 9? Like anything related to virtual threads, like statistics or?
Yeah. So, so the question, oh, I guess he's talking to the microphone. Yeah, they can hear it. Yeah, no, virtual thread information. So virtual threads are fundamentally just threads. So like all that information would still be captured within JMC and JFR. So like it would be visualized. I think the biggest issue, and I haven't really tested it out yet, could just come from the fact that with virtual threads, you can, have an effectively unlimited number of them. So like the visualization here, so like this threads page, it might struggle if you have like 1 million concurrent threads or something. So like that would be about the only issue. I don't know if they've really updated it yet to properly kind of account for the fact that virtual threads you can have a whole lot more of them. But otherwise, they would show up here. Yep.
Just a quick question.
Mhm.
So the information that is being shown in the mission control,
Mhm.
how does it compare to something that we might be seeing in a business observability tool like, New Relic?
So yeah, I think like it's been a really long time since I last used New Relic, and never affect a whole lot in Anger. But I think like New Relic, a lot of them probably would also incorporate stuff from JFR if you're running it. So like New Relic may have other areas of taking up information, maybe also from like JMX, which you can also use through here. And it's also just adding in JFR information as well into it. Oh, yeah.
So I believe New Relic is a pull model versus this is a push of an event model.
Uh-huh.
That's another main difference between the two.
Yeah. So. Mhm. All right. So that's right. As mentioned, so one of the things with JFR is that it is meant to be used continuously in production. So far, when I was just running it, just with start flight recording, you would never want to actually do that in production, because you would start just completely filling up the machine with all these recording information. Let's update this to Garden State Jug. No, yeah, we don't want that Philly people in here, so.
Hey, who said that about Philly?
But yeah, the particular things you would, okay, that is up. Oh wait, I also have it right. The things you would really want to care about when running in production is max age and max size. So this is saying like it will only keep the last 5 minutes of the recording of your application and only up to 10 megabytes of that. And so you also want to, that's good. No. So the backend behavior of JFR is that it would read from these. So as the events are being written, it would dump these events to in-memory thread local buffers. And these are only maybe like a megabyte or maybe even less in size. And then once those are full, it'll drop these to these global buffers. And as these get filled up, then this information would then be dumped to a on-disk recording file. Turn that back so this. Oh, okay, okay, thank you. And so this will dump it to like a repository. And in this previous settings, I have it dump. Usually it'll go just to a temp directory, but I have it being written to a local directory here just for ease. So I have it being. Oh, if I actually started it. So yeah, I'm having it be written to this GS jug directory. So as you see here, it's going to be writing these files. And I was to go back to here. Well, I can't find it right now, but at least one of the configurations I did is I set up the chunk size to be 2 megabytes. So each of these different files will only get to 2 megabytes in size before it would start to roll over. This is going to tell the application just to do a whole lot of work, and it's going to create a whole lot of events. So yeah, once it gets about 2 megabytes in size, JFR will cut it off, and it's not going to cut it off exactly at 2 megabytes. So that's why this one's a little bit over. But as we'll see here, yeah, and then it's going to cut that next one off, and now it's going on to the next file. So it'll progressively go through this, and overall, I set the max size before to 10 megabytes. So here in a few minutes, it's eventually going to hit that overall max size, and then this first file, which ends in 10_20, that's going to be deleted, and that's a way to where you just don't have an ever extending consumption of disk space, because if you have a very heavily used production application, obviously that's going to be writing a huge event, and then you could be starting to take up many gigabytes of disk space, and that obviously isn't ideal. You don't want to have your Amazon S3 bill all of a sudden explode. That might make your boss very upset at some point. But yeah, so I have it in this case. So I'm using like 10 megabytes and 5 minutes for the max age and max size. So if I, sit here and ramble on for about 5 minutes, we'll start to see that these older recordings would also be deleted. Now, I'm obviously kind of doing that just for the purposes of a demo. You wouldn't want to use such small limits in a production setting. You would probably want to, have a few gigabytes in size or something that lasts for like a day or something, because you obviously don't want to be like, oh, we saw this application, it ran into a huge bunch of issues overnight. Oh no, all the recordings are gone because you only set it 30 minutes. So you would want to have it be something more substantial, so that way if you did find you ran into some sort of issues, you can actually have a historical log to go back to.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Well. So apart from putting it into a file, are there any other integrations I could do with JFR to write to, let us say, some other SMS kind of system or messaging or any other?
Yeah, so one thing they added back in JDK 14 was event streaming. I did have that previously set up before, but like one of the engineers, like they set up a JFR agent to where it would stream out like live data from JFR to where you can kind of like look live on your application within like a few seconds of what was actually actively happening in it. I have a link to that in my presentation. So it's the JFR health report. And this is more of a demonstration than necessarily something you would want to do in production. But this is like the kind of view it would give printed out to your command line of an active, what's going on within the application. So, and we'll actually get a little bit more into streams as well as some interesting ways you can use JFR streams. But that's a great question.
So Billy, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So I've worked with this a little bit, and I've noticed that you initiate the switches for JDK Flight Recorder, and then you start a jar file.
Yeah.
What if you generate a WAR file and deploy that WAR file on a application server? Is
Yeah.
there a way you could initiate JFR if something's running on an app server?
Oh, so like you're having it run like in WebLogic to have it. So yeah, you would still just refer to that. You can't just have JFR running for a specific application. It runs at the JVM level. So you would just find the process where that like the WebLogic or whatever is running and start up JFR for it. And then for obviously everything running on that WebLogic or whatever application server you have running would then be using JFR at that point. But yeah, you couldn't do it on a per application basis when you have maybe perhaps multiple applications running on a application server.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Thanks.
Mhm. So yeah, when it comes to configuring JFR, so there is the command line configuration. Primarily what you would be doing is working with start flight recording. And we see here it has many options you can take: max age, max size, disk, which actually I don't really need this because that's already automatically set to true. The file name, and so the file name is just a default where those recordings I was showing earlier here. So when I would tell JFR to dump, it would then JFR would combine these files together and then dump it out to a file with the file name that you give it, either here or what you're doing through the dump command. But the other way, and there is a few other options at one of the links here. Yeah, this shows you all the other different options available for starting a flight recording. But one of the other important configurations is the settings file. And so by default, JFR comes with two settings files. It comes with the default settings, which if I didn't provide a settings here, that's what would be used. And then profile. And then profile, I think it enables a few more additional commands. And I think it also includes a larger percentage of the stack. So that's why it takes up a bit more overhead. But you can create your own settings file. And if I was to do here, open custom, that's it. And this is what the settings file looks like. It's simply a XML file. and it goes through like all the different events you have within it. I think I have it here at the bottom. No, I don't. Not for this one. But also, if you were to create your own custom events, which we'll touch on here in a few moments, this is also how you can configure your event as well. One of the most useful configuration settings, particularly when perhaps creating your own custom events, is threshold. So as you see, like a lot of events could be executing within your application. And like, let's again go back to the example of like calling out to a database, because obviously that's a lot of time what we're spending and doing when running an application, particularly a web application, is loading information from a database. And that can often be a source of poor performance, because maybe you have a query that in certain cases it just runs a really long time. So let's say you create your own event to follow when you're actually calling out to a database. And like 99% of the time that query and returns back within like, 2 milliseconds, and that's perfectly fine within your application performance metrics. But if sometimes it can take like a second or something, in which case you would actually want to capture that event. So what you could do here is through the threshold settings is say, in this case, this is saying there's no threshold, so it'll capture everything. But if I was to set it to 10 milliseconds, anytime this event executes in 9 milliseconds or less, JFR is just going to ignore it. It's not going to try capturing it, but if it takes 10 milliseconds or longer, then it would actually be captured by JFR. So that way, you're not going to get a bunch of noise about a bunch of events you don't care about. You would only get the events you would actually care about, you think are meaningful based upon threshold. There's a few other ones. This is probably the most common one you'd be interacting with. There is also period, I believe. Yeah, period. So like this is saying, like exception statistics, this is saying every 1 second this event's going to run, or if this event gets triggered, it's going to be captured to where it will capture exception statistics over that previous period by the JVM. But generally, you'll probably be working with event types where your threshold is going to be the important thing. Also, one thing that's really nice, I think this was JDK 17, but also with the JFR tool, they added a they added a JFR configure tool, because before, how you would create a custom JFR configuration files, you would go in. So the JDK, you would see if you dug down into it, they would have these provided settings or configuration files, and you would maybe just copy it and then update it to whatever you would need to be. Or in some cases, some of our JFR engineers have found that customers were updating the one directly within the JDK. So part of the reason they added this JFR configure tool is to allow you to easily create your own configuration files. And they even have an interactive one to where it will go through, it's 12 questions it will go through to set one up. And if you were just to hit enter 12 times, it will basically create a configuration file that would match the default settings. So that way you can always get like a good baseline to start from, and then configure it to match the needs of your application or your organization.
Become a part of a deployment panel to go onto a production host? I'm sorry, the question was, can this become a part of a deployment bundle to go onto a production host?
Yeah, you could add this into, you can bundle it up with your application and then, refer to it. Mm-hmm. All right, so I've been mentioning it a bit before, but let's actually demonstrate it or show it off. So you can create your own custom events. And to do that, all you simply need to do is extend jdk.jfr events, and you have your own custom JFR event. You don't have to do anything more, but of course, you would probably want to capture information. So you can add fields to your events, and then, show it in a minute sending it. But the fields that JFR will capture, they can be string, are any primitive type. If I created like a custom record and then try to populate that record with an event, JFR will just simply ignore it. Then there's also a lot of different annotations as well. And these primarily are for providing metadata. For name, you would, by default, if you don't provide a name, it will just simply use the fully qualified class name for it, which might be fine, but you probably would want to actually create your own custom event. And, probably, so like all of the provided JDK events are JDK.event name. So you probably want to go with like organizational name. So like in this case, I have like GS Jug. Yesterday, when I was doing at Philly Jug, I was presenting at Sotara. So like, you're creating custom events at your organization, you would use your organizational name and then the event type. And it's always good then to provide, additional information, this collects important events, a farther description. Another important one would be also categories. And that's a way of like separating out the different events. So let's go in here. So we see like the event browser in JMC, it would show like performance business critical, because that's how I provided the different label types to separate out the events. So yeah, if you have, yes.
So you, just out of curiosity, maybe you'll cover this, but when you set up your config earlier, is it possible for me to customize to only show my custom events instead of the standard JDK events?
Yes, yeah, you would have to kind of go through and disable all the events, but so yeah, you would, let's see. So let's configure. So probably how you would do that most easily is you probably go through and create a JFC. Yeah, going through like the interactive one, create JFC first, probably just set everything to off. In this case, I'm doing that here. Yeah, I guess that's maybe fine for those defaults. Okay, let me reopen this file. So a lot of these are still enabled and true. So you would want to, if you just want to completely turn off like all the JDK events, then you would have to go through and just update all these to false so they won't be captured, and then turn it on for just your events. And to simply do that. So actually an event you add would be enabled by default. So you wouldn't necessarily need to go through and actually manually enable it, but if you still wanted to be explicit about it. What is it, sorry?
Would that work on OpenJDK, or would you need
this would totally work on any version of hotspots. So any version, when I say hotspot, that would be, of course, yeah, OpenJDK, Oracle JDK, Azure, Amazon, Korando, Microsoft's Adoptium, like all of those are all based on hotspots. So it should work in all of those. Now, if you're using like something like OpenJ9, then that wouldn't work, because that's a completely different implementation of the JVM. So not only is JFR9 in there, it just would be fundamentally different. So it wouldn't be able to capture any information. Yes.
So is it possible for me to run multiple instances of JFR against, let's say, a container that's hosting multiple apps, and have custom events for each of those be reported?
So what you could do, or at least the most similar thing to maybe what you're talking about, is, so like, let's say you have an application that's already running and you have it on default settings and you want it more detailed settings, you can, kind of the way I was showing earlier, using, do I have this working? Did I close that?
I mean, that's all right. We could always take that offline, but if it's possible.
No, it's absolutely possible. Let me just get 1 second just to get back to that. For some reason, I accidentally closed that. Or did I? No, I didn't. Okay, so here, let's, yeah. I have my application running and I'm using default settings. And to maybe a little bit, maybe to what Chandra is sort of asking here is maybe I need to change the settings. I want to change it to profile because I need to get more detail into it. But of course, I don't want to have to restart my application to do that. And to do that, then I could take using JCMD, I could do start and then settings equals to profile, file name, GS jug.
Got it.
Yeah. So then you could do that. So that way you can increase that. And then the way JFR would work, so if you had some sort of completely different custom settings file, is it would take like the Venn diagram and whatever the combination that makes it like that tends towards capturing the most information, it would capture all that. And then JFR would know how to trunk that off to the different versions or the different repositories that are running.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that all answer then the question? Cool. Fantastic. Event. So if you created a custom event, you would need to then add that into your actual application. And so the way that would work is you would create a new instance of that event, and then you would call begin on it, and then you would have whatever business behavior you want to have captured by it, and then there's end and there's commits. So if I was to call commit on it, that would also end the timing in JFR and then dump it to the thread local file. Then eventually it'll make it to the JFR recording. And many times, that might be enough where you would maybe want to separate out end from commit. So end would end the timing on it. And then if there was like some sort of complex behavior you wanted to add that's be written to the event, for collecting information that might take some amount of time to execute, then you would do that after the end and then run the commit because, if important value was some sort of calculated value and maybe that took on average 5 milliseconds to compute, then that would be included within the timing for the event, and that can kind of mess with perhaps the execution of it or how it's being measured.
So and summarizes the amount of time our event activity took, and
Yeah.
commit just does the reporting.
That dumps it to the thread local buffers and to actually get it recorded. Yes. Let's see. Is there? Yeah. As mentioned, I probably should go through and actually create a little bit more of an interesting event. But you can, as you've seen here, like I'm writing to this value, and in this example, I'll probably not. It's unlikely you would have the event co-located within the same package. So you probably would have like a getter and setter to set the values for it. Or probably more just a setter, and yeah, you could obviously provide a different event, but as mentioned, it has to be either string or one of the primitive types. Anything else would simply be ignored. The last thing is, so one of the cool things also with the addition of streams is you could actually even use JFR within unit testing now. And so I have a very simple example here where actually, do I want to this to deliberately not have it run properly? But it was a run days event. What was it? Yeah, no, I was deliberately showing that. So in this case, it didn't run correctly because, as Chandra correctly noted, I'm referencing the incorrect event name. So you would need to match by event name. But it's basically saying whenever this event fires, add this to this recorded event stream or to this list of recorded events, then I'm executing my code here where I'm running that event one time. And then I can take this list of recorded events I have here and then go through it and, maybe make sure that checking the fields of it to make sure that it's actually being executed. So yeah, this can be good just to get like a actual view within your application. So like if you're doing like a lot of side effect, like say calling out to a database or calling to a file, some external service, this can be a good way of saying like, okay, wait, what's actually happening as I'm calling out to that? Because that's maybe not a return value that you're getting back from it. So that can be good. Or the unfortunate thing is that where something like this would be really useful is like on a legacy application that may be like have like a 1,000-line long method, which if you've been in industry long enough, which I think many people here have been in industry for a while, you'll run into. And those things are just an absolute beast to almost impossible to refactor and maintain. But like something like this could be very helpful. You can have an event, be like, oh, okay, so here we're calling out to the database to like load the customer, and then we're taking that information back, and then we're creating the order, and then we're taking that back, and then we're updating the order, like all within the same method. You could probably write events around those different sections to make sure that the data you're sending and pulling back is like all that you're expecting. And then from there, you could actually then use that because you have to unit test now to maybe actually refactor that code. But before that, because it's all side effect, you can't actually test the individual things. Was very difficult. Unfortunately, again, a lot of these changes were in JDK 14 or later, which a lot of these legacy applications are probably still in JDK 8 or 7 or even earlier. So unfortunately, Streams wasn't available then. But a very brilliant guy. He used to be with Red Hat. He's recently changed Gunnar Morling. But he also wrote a library called JFR unit. So you can see that here at the bottom, where it kind of provides a wrap around this behavior to make it a little bit easier to use. So that's definitely worth checking out if you're considering using JFR for unit testing. Another thing is actually about a year ago, I published a video. So I have a series of videos I call a Stack Walker, where I try to go into underlying depth various items within the JVM. And so for this one, I did it on JFR. So I kind of give like a lot of both the history of JFR and then the underlying technical details of like how it all actually works, and actually kind of gives examples again of how like JFR events work, how things are actually recorded. So if you're kind of curious about how this is all actually working, or maybe need to justify it to like your manager or something to actually start using it, you can kind of refer to that video and kind of get a lot of the details I kind of cover here and a few more details as well that I didn't cover. And then, yeah, we also have like the programmer's guide to JFR. So this kind of goes through a lot of the different API that's available within it for like, again, it gives you more information on creating events, working with, and also like working with the streams as well. So a lot of great information there. So yeah, that's mostly it. But yeah, if there's any more questions then.
Oh,
Yes.
There we go. Wait, there. You got it. Yeah.
Would garbage collection post be one of the events?
Oh, what class did you have to extend? Sorry?
Would a garbage collection post be one of the events?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I go back to JMC here, yeah, garbage selections. So yeah, this shows you like detailed information, like here, the different pauses that are happening. And you can even see here, like this is G1 new, that means it's like a young generation pause. G1 old, obviously then an old generation pause or a full garbage collection pause. So yeah, it covers all that. It even covers all the a lot of the garbage collection behavior. Any more questions?
No more questions? No. All right, let's give Billy a round of applause.
All right. I don't know, Chandra, I guess you've used it in production. Do you have any other questions you wanted to quiz me? You good? Okay, cool.
All right, so yes, we can go back to that
last slide.
That, I'll reveal.
Oh, to your, yes.
Yeah. If you're done.
Yeah, I am. Actually, at this point, I'm no longer really on Twitter, and I'll get, so it'd be actually best to contact me through, email, and let me go back to that. Do I have it? And so yeah, billy.korando@oracle.com. So if you have any questions, any feedback, only positive feedback, I'll be happy to hear. No,
Any
even
complaints from Nicola?
any complaint, and yes, yeah, if you have any complaints, yeah, I'll send those on to Nikolai.
So yeah, I failed to mention earlier, I know for a while, every Monday you'd have this sip of Java, which was in
Yeah.
the previous series. And I was looking up, I think you still publish some of those.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
occasionally
yeah.
publish them. I need to get back to being a bit more regular with them.
They're always fun. That's a good 1 to 2 minutes of particular topic.
Mhm.
There's things that are that are funny in there. And also too, a lot of the more the longer pieces that you do with
Mhm.
Nikolai Parlog and Anna
Yeah.
Maria. I mean, not only do you learn something, but it's actually entertaining as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's
Appreciate that.
I mean, I always get a kick out of it.
Yeah,
Especially
good.
when Nikolai makes a mistake of Kansas City, Kansas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I corrected him on that one.
Stuff like that. It's really good. I had a chance to meet Anna Maria at DevNexus last month. And that was the first time she contributed to the InfoQ Trends report.
Oh, cool.
Nice. I think 1 year or 2 ago. So yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Fantastic.
but this is all part of the Oracle Java developer advocates.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, so it's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yeah, just to wrap things up, there's some upcoming events. Tomorrow is the Oracle Dev Live New York City. I guess this is a Java day.
Yeah, so like it's like a full 4-day event. So it's like I think like the first day is database, and we have cloud, and then tomorrow they'll have Java. So that's what obviously I and a few others of us will be presenting at. So
yeah, so it's free. So I registered. I'm planning to be there tomorrow. There's some Helidon talks. I'm interested. What's that? No, it's free. Yeah. Yep. There's the URL. You can register.
Yep.
But I will say some of the stuff has been booked. I kind of booked a little too late myself, but there's still, but yeah, I'm sure there's things that you can attend. There's some keynotes, there's a lunch,
Yeah.
beer or no? No.
I don't know, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's events team particular.
So,
Yeah.
what's that? Of course,
Yes.
yeah. So there's the URL for that. Next week is JCon Europe in Köln, Germany. I always laugh at the American version of Köln. It's Cologne, but it's being a German that I am, so I always have to put it the correct way. But so that's going on next week. I know a few of the folks are out there for that, like Emily Zhang is going to be there, and all that. So, and then the InfoQ, as you know, has their big QCon conferences. They're doing something new this year. There's not a New York event this year, unfortunately. They have these smaller events called Dev Summit, InfoQ Dev Summit. There's one in Boston, and it's right before KCDC. So if you want to spend a week, 2 days in Boston and fly out to Kansas City, you can make a week out of it, right? So this is at Boston University. And it's 2 days instead of 3 days of talk. So this is something new that they're trying to do. In September, there's a Dev Summit Munich in Germany, or München, as it's pronounced. And then, of course, I referenced Kansas City Developers Conference, or KCDC, is the latter part of the week over there at the Kansas City Convention Center. And I was going to make a joke about making that Kansas, but yeah, let that alone. And Dev 2 Next is at the end of September into October in Colorado. And this is the one that Venkat Subramaniam has organized. And we get a $50 discount. If you saw my email earlier today, there's a QR code and a link for that. I'm going to add that to these slides for the next couple of months. So to do that. The old Eclipse Con has been rebranded to the Open Community Experience, or OCX. That's in Mainz, Germany, in late October. Mainz.
Yeah.
So that's going on there. And one last one, QCon San Francisco, which I registered to do another round of dedicated reporting. It's in the Hyatt Regency San Francisco, which is quite nice. And that's a full week. The first 3 days are the talks, and then there's workshops, the latter part of the week. So, and then upcoming events for us, we have Mark Nelson, also from Oracle.
Yeah.
And so he'll be here next month with this nice short title known as Making It Easy to Run Spring Boot Microservices in the Cloud, Security, and at Scale with Oracle. So, that's a mouthful.
Man, yeah, that needs to be an acronym or something.
Yeah, I know. I have to shorten that, right? And then in July is Nehar Sadana. As you know, she's one of our leaders. And so she'll be here, and it's actually her birthday, but don't tell her we're going to surprise her. So we'll have to prevent her from watching the YouTube.
Surprise her that it's her birthday. She doesn't realize that
No,
yet?
she does. No, she even said
Yeah,
that. I said,
It's her birthday.
well, she said that. It's the second Tuesday. That was
Yeah.
corrected. She goes, yeah, I don't mind. I said,
No.
oh, we'll celebrate. So anyway, she's going to talk about Scala. Now, you know, I don't know how many people have done anything with Scala at all. So, and
Yeah,
here's a chance to, early on in my InfoQ writing, I did a couple of talks, not talks, couple of news items on Scala, especially when 3 was coming out. So, be kind of good to see what's going on there. And then, we as the leadership need to choose one of Marcus Hellberg's talks. And so he'll be here September 10th. And then Amol Gote, who I met at the IT Professional Conference at TCF back in March, he gave this presentation. So he was interested in presenting here. That's October 8th. And then my conversation with Gerrit Grunwald last month, he's going to be out in the US the week of October 28th. He hasn't gotten back to my email last night. He's already confirmed for Seattle on the 29th. So he's going to be in the other end of the country, but yeah. So
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, so stay tuned for that. We you know, we'll see what we can choose from there. So, and then friends of Garden State Java Group, as I mentioned before, Billy's going to be in New York tomorrow for the same talk. We tried. Yes,
Yep.
it's right near BNY Mellon. Yep. And it's only a couple of blocks from.
Yeah,
from
worked
the-
out pretty convenient.
Really?
And they're like,
Did you guys really coordinate that, or is that?
yeah,
work out?
I think it kind of worked out because is that where they're generally meeting at now? Or yeah, so it just got lucky with that.
Yeah. So, no, excuse me. And then next Thursday, Kansas City Jug,
Yep.
Ethan McHugh, the Developer's Guide to Upgrading to JDK 21. And then the Boston Group, formerly the New England Jug, Edgar Ignatowicz, I think that's how you pronounce that. And then that's how community engagement can boost your staff plus career. Everybody else either had their sessions and I think there's one more in June. That's in June, okay. But yeah, so that's what's going on around the world. And thank you. So yeah, so thanks for coming out. Our next meeting's on June 11th. So we'll hope to see you then.